Here's something that will mess with your head for a second. Right now, today, April 11th, 2026, American and Iranian diplomats are supposed to sit down in Islamabad, Pakistan, and try to hammer out a peace deal that could reshape the entire Middle East. The ceasefire between the United States and Iran went into effect just 2 days ago, on April 8th, and at the center of it all is a 10-point proposal that Iran put forward, which President Trump himself called a workable basis on which to negotiate. Now here's where this gets really interesting for you and me. Behind the scenes of every modern military negotiation, every ceasefire monitoring effort, every diplomatic chess move happening right now, there is a quiet revolution taking place. Artificial intelligence is already being used to draft peace agreements, to monitor ceasefires from space, and to simulate how world leaders might react to specific proposals before anyone even picks up the phone. But here's the thing nobody's talking about. AI did not broker this ceasefire between America and Iran. A human being did. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif picked up the phone, shuttled between Washington and Tehran, and got both sides to agree to stop firing. So the question is, in a world where AI can do all of these incredible things, why wasn't it at the table for the biggest deal of 2026? And what does that tell us about where AI actually stands in the world of war and peace? Stick with me on this one, because by the end of this episode, the way you think about both this ceasefire and artificial intelligence is going to change completely. Let me catch you up on what's actually happening right now, because the speed of these events has been absolutely dizzying. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched an air war against Iran. Iran's supreme leader was killed in the opening strikes, along with many other officials and military targets. Iran responded with missile and drone strikes against Israel, against U.S. bases, and against U.S. allied countries across the Middle East. And then Iran did something that sent shockwaves through the entire global economy. They closed the Strait of Hormuz. Now, if you don't know what the Strait of Hormuz is, think of it as the world's most important bottleneck for oil. About 20% of all the oil on the planet passes through that narrow waterway between Iran and Oman. When Iran shut it down, energy markets went into a tailspin, and the pressure on both sides to find a way out became enormous. For weeks, Pakistan tried to mediate. They delivered a 15-point U.S. proposal to Iran that included dismantling nuclear facilities, limits on missiles, and reopening the strait. Iran rejected it, calling it extremely maximalist and unreasonable. Then Iran came back with their own 10-point plan, which they sent through Pakistan to Washington. On April 6th, President Trump stood at the White House and called the plan a significant step but not good enough. He set a deadline, Tuesday evening, April 7th, and warned that if Iran didn't reopen the Strait of Hormuz, he would target bridges, power plants, and civilian infrastructure across the country. And then, just hours before that deadline expired, both sides agreed to a 2-week ceasefire. Now here's what Iran's 10-point plan actually includes, based on what their Supreme National Security Council released publicly. It calls for regulating passage through the Strait of Hormuz under Iranian military coordination. It demands an end to all attacks on Iran and its allied forces. It calls for the withdrawal of U.S. combat forces from the region. It demands compensation for war damages. It calls for lifting all international sanctions and unfreezing Iranian assets. And it demands a binding United Nations resolution to lock in any final deal. Some versions of the plan, released by Iranian state media in both Farsi and English, also include a claim to the right to nuclear enrichment. The White House says the version they're actually negotiating from is different from the one Iran released publicly. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said that Iran originally put forward a plan that was fundamentally unserious, which was literally thrown in the garbage, and that a more reasonable and condensed version came later. So here we are, a fragile truce, 2 weeks on the clock. Delegations heading to Islamabad today, led by Vice President J.D. Vance on the American side, and the whole world watching to see if this thing holds together or falls apart. But what I want to talk to you about today goes beyond the headline. I want to talk about the role that artificial intelligence is playing and not playing in moments like this one. So let me take you inside something that most people have never heard of. At the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C., one of the most influential think tanks in America, there's a team called the Futures Lab. They're funded by the Pentagon's Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Office, and they've been experimenting with AI models like ChatGPT and DeepSeek to explore how artificial intelligence might be applied to questions of war and peace. In 2025, the Futures Lab built something called Strategic Headwinds, an interactive program designed to help shape negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. Here's how it works. They trained an AI model on 333 real peace agreements from 1989 to 2018, compiled by the Uppsala Conflict Data Program. Then they added 79 articles from major news outlets discussing potential peace talks. The AI uses all of that data to identify areas of agreement between opposing sides and suggest paths toward a ceasefire. They even built a peace agreement simulator where users can input preferences across 4 categories: territory and sovereignty, security arrangements, economic conditions, and justice and accountability. The AI then drafts an agreement and scores how acceptable each element would be for Russia, Ukraine, the United States, and the European Union. Benjamin Jensen, the director of the Futures Lab, says that while the idea of using AI for foreign policy has been around for a while, putting it into practice is still in its early stages, and the results have been mixed, sometimes insightful, sometimes unintentionally comic. Here's one finding that really stands out. When CSIS researchers tested 8 different AI models by feeding them tens of thousands of questions about deterrence and crisis escalation, they found something fascinating. Models like OpenAI's GPT-4o and Anthropic's Claude were consistently pacifist, recommending the use of force in fewer than 17% of scenarios. But 3 other models, Meta's Llama, Alibaba's Qwen, and Google's Gemini, were far more aggressive, favoring escalation up to 45% of the time. And here's the kicker. The recommendations changed depending on which country the AI was advising. When simulating a US, British, or French diplomat, these AI systems tended to recommend more aggressive action, but when advising Russia or China, they suggested de-escalation. Think about what that means for a second. The AI models we're building already carry the biases of the data they were trained on. But that's not even the most important part of this story. And honestly, before I get into this, drop a comment below and tell me what you think. Should AI be involved in decisions about war and peace? I genuinely want to hear your take on this one, because what I'm about to tell you next is about what AI is already doing in actual conflict zones right now, not in simulations, not in think tanks, but on the ground where people's lives are at stake. So while the ceasefire between the US and Iran is brand new, the technology for monitoring ceasefires with AI has been developing for years, and one company in particular has been at the forefront of this work. Hala Systems is a technology company based in Wilmington, Delaware, that built something called Sentry, an end-to-end platform that uses artificial intelligence, satellite imagery, acoustic sensors, and even blockchain technology to monitor conflict zones in real time. They first deployed Sentry in Syria in 2016, where it provided early warning of airstrikes to civilians. The system combined mobile apps, sensor networks, and AI algorithms to track and predict threats. According to the company, after deployment in Syria, their technology gave civilians an average of 7 to 10 minutes of warning before an airstrike. In 2018, they estimated that their system helped reduce casualty rates by 20 to 27%. Since then, Hala Systems has expanded to Yemen and Ukraine, where their AI-powered platform has supported ceasefire monitoring through satellite imagery analysis and data fusion. They've even submitted what they describe as the world's first ever dossier to the International Criminal Court, featuring cryptographically secured evidence of potential war crimes. Now think about what this means for the Iran ceasefire happening right now. As of today, Iran's parliamentary speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf has already claimed that 3 points of the 10-point proposal have been violated. He says Israeli attacks continued in Lebanon, a drone entered Iranian airspace, and Iran's right to enrichment was denied. The United States disputes these claims. This is exactly the kind of situation where AI-powered monitoring could make a massive difference. Satellite imagery analyzed by artificial intelligence can objectively verify whether military activity has occurred in a specific area. Acoustic sensors can detect weapons fire. Data fusion can combine multiple sources to create a picture that's much harder for either side to dispute. The United Nations has already used similar technology in other contexts. The UN peacekeeping mission in Cyprus has used cameras with motion sensors to monitor buffer zones. The UN mission in Mali used radars, unmanned aerial systems, and radio monitoring. The Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe used technology extensively in its monitoring mission in Ukraine between 2014 and 2022, partly because conditions were too dangerous for human monitors. But here's what AI cannot do in a situation like the Iran ceasefire. It cannot read the room. It cannot sense when a negotiator is bluffing. It cannot build the personal trust between leaders that Pakistan's prime minister built by calling both sides repeatedly. Stefan Heumann, a member of Germany's Parliamentary Expert Commission on Artificial Intelligence, put it this way: personal relationships between leaders can change the course of negotiations, and AI simply cannot replicate that. Andrew Moore, an adjunct senior fellow at the Center for a New American Security, sees a future where AI starts the negotiation process, doing the initial analysis and finding common ground, and then the human negotiator steps in to hash out the final details. But we're not there yet, not even close. So where does all of this leave us? And more importantly, what should you take away from this? First, the good news. AI tools for peace are advancing rapidly. At the 2025 Stockholm Forum on Peace and Development, an international consortium of researchers and practitioners from the University of Birmingham, the Swedish Folke Academy, and organizations from around the world gathered specifically to explore how AI can help build and sustain peace. They showcased real applications, from ceasefire monitoring in Yemen to AI-facilitated dialogues between Israeli and Palestinian communities, to citizen-driven peace processes in Sudan, where AI-enhanced platforms enabled over 6,500 people to co-create dialogue outcomes. Second, there are things you can do right now to stay informed and engaged. Pay attention to who is mediating, not just who is fighting. In the ceasefire, Pakistan played the critical role. Understanding mediation dynamics helps you see through the spin from both sides. Look for objective verification when both sides claim the other broke the deal. Satellite imagery and open-source intelligence are increasingly available to the public through organizations like Bellingcat and other investigative groups. Support organizations working at the intersection of technology and peace. Groups like the United States Institute of Peace, the Computational Democracy Project, and academic institutions like the University of Notre Dame are doing groundbreaking work on using AI for conflict resolution rather than conflict creation. And finally, understand that AI is a tool, not a decision maker. The Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs at Harvard published a paper in December 2025 arguing that the State Department should build a department-wide AI ecosystem that unites analytics, negotiation modeling, and predictive dashboards, but they also emphasized that AI will not replace the human core of diplomacy. It will remain a powerful tool in the hands of diplomats. The real question isn't whether AI will transform diplomacy. It already is. The question is whether we'll use it wisely enough to help prevent the next conflict before it starts. So let me bring this full circle. Today, April 10th, 2026, American and Iranian delegations are supposed to arrive in Islamabad. Vice President J.D. Vance is leading the U.S. team. Iran's 10-point plan is on the table, or at least some version of it is. The White House says many of the 15 points from America's earlier proposal have already been agreed to. Iran says it forced America to accept its framework. The truth, as always, is somewhere in the messy middle. What we know for certain is this: no artificial intelligence brokered this ceasefire. A Pakistani prime minister, working the phones between Washington and Tehran, got both sides to step back from the brink. But AI is already being used to monitor whether that ceasefire holds, to analyze satellite imagery of military positions, to process thousands of pages of past peace agreements for patterns, and to simulate what might happen if specific provisions are included or excluded from the final deal. AI didn't sit at the table, but it's in the room. And in the next conflict, and the one after that, it's going to be sitting closer and closer to the people making the decisions. The technology is here. The question is, are the humans ready to use it right? If this made you think even a little bit differently about what's happening in the world right now, hit that like button. It genuinely helps more people find this. I want to hear from you on this one. Do you think AI should have a role in peace negotiations? Or is this something that should stay entirely in human hands? Drop your honest opinion in the comments. I read every single one. And think about someone in your life who's been following the Iran situation or who worries about where technology is taking us. Send them this video right now. It might change how they see both of those things. If this is your first time here, we drop new episodes every other day, and honestly, it only gets crazier from here. Subscribe, hit that bell, and I'll see you in the next one.